Welcome to Champion Stepdad Podcast. We are exploring the unique role of stepdads, stepfathers, and bonus dads, and how to apply performance psychology skills to become better father figures and role models. We are building a band of brothers by focusing on empathy and accountability. Join the Champion Stepdad Facebook group and build your band of brothers. I'm your host, Neil Wattier. I am a 16-year stepdad, a resilience trainer, and a performance consultant, encouraging you to become a champion stepdad. Today, I am joined by Michael Larson. He's a parent, teen, and family counselor. As a dad, a stepdad, and formerly a foster parent, he is on a mission to help you create a healthy home with tools and skills effective for healthy parenting. I connected with Michael on Facebook. We are in several family and step parenting groups. His Facebook group is called Empowered Parenting, Creating a Healthy Parent-Child Relationship, and his website is mylifeupgrade.ca. Michael Larson, thanks a lot for joining me on Champion Stepdad Podcast. We bumped into each other a couple times in some Facebook groups. We shared some information in the Stepdad's Den, but then also you have your own group called Empowered Parenting. You're somebody that I've been looking forward to having on the show, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast.
Thanks, Neil. I'm glad to be here. It's great that you have a podcast dedicated to stepdads. It's a very important role.
Yeah, man. And, you know, we come on here and we talk about the idea of mental skills, performance skills, right? That the same things that athletes use, the same things that high risk performers use, you know, military, police, and surgeons. Like, why wouldn't we apply this to stepdads, right? It's such an important role. So where do your original thoughts come from when you were going to come on the show? We were going to have this conversation. What are your thoughts about the challenges that stepdads face, and then how do you approach that?
Yeah, so I met my stepdaughter 5 years ago. So I would consider myself maybe a stepdad for maybe about 3 years, right? Because to me, the first 2 years is it's a feeling out process, introduction, different things. So my thoughts on parenting in general, it's the hardest job that we'll ever take on. It's difficult, and it's one of the only jobs we don't get trained for. So then when I look at stepdads, it's even more difficult than a biological relationship. And why I say that, because there's so many different layers to it. And there's so many different things that provoke emotions in us. And I'm a big believer when it comes to parenting, when it comes to being a stepdad, it's all about these emotions that we're feeling, right? What's going on within us, these triggers, these different things. So I like to say we got to parent ourselves first. So we got, as a stepdad, it's this balancing act of almost following the child's lead, right? And feeding off them, like what are they comfortable with? What are they looking for? And it's difficult, but it's also very powerful to be a stepdad, to have a relationship with a child that is not yours biologically, right? So it's a very important role, and it can be very powerful.
And you mentioned, so you are a stepdad, but then you also are involved in a helping role. So what do you do as far as helping parents? Let's get into that a little bit. Give a brief introduction of you.
Yeah. So what I do is I own a business called Life Upgrade. So I'm a teen parent and family counselor. And for about a year now, my entire focus has been on parent counseling. It's been a shift for years and years and years. About 15 years I was working with families and teens, and what a common thing was this parent-child relationship. So when I met with teens and different things and all these struggles, this relationship they had with their parents would come up, or with their foster parents or their step parents, and it's such a strain on children. I don't think we realize that. So that what I do is I work with parents and I teach them strategies that are effective, because I think I mentioned earlier, it's a hard job. We don't get trained for it. We don't, it's like, hey, here's a kid and just figure it out. It doesn't,
we look at the skills that we do receive is stuff that we model from seeing other people. And a lot of times we pick up on the things that we don't like. And I found in myself, especially when in my early parenting years, I found myself doing stuff just because that's what I saw, or that's what I went through, or that's what my parents did. But it was the stuff that I didn't like, and so it took me a long time to to not only become aware of those things, but then the process of changing them. I mean,
Yeah.
when I first became a dad 25 years ago, there was mental health, but that was for crazy people. Like that, we didn't go to counseling. And
Yeah.
if I would have known that, I probably I might be married to my first wife, because back in the day, we didn't know this stuff. We
Hmm.
didn't know the resources, or the resources were not provided to us like they are now. And I think it's a great shift. And I promote mental health all the time. I'm a performance consultant. I look at where you are now and where you're going, as opposed to clinical. I try to make sure that is very abundantly clear. I'm not a clinical therapist. I'm not a clinical counselor. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a performance consultant. And that's an important distinction, because people need to know, both personally, professionally, and ethically, like, what can I expect from you? What's your specialty? Well, my specialty is performance, no different than working with an athlete or a high risk profession. I work a lot with military or performing arts. So what is your education background?
I was in university. I got a double major in criminal justice and conflict resolution. So I started my work in the justice system. My first job while I was in university was in a group home. That's how I kind of got my start. Is I just needed a part-time job, and my buddy's like, "Hey, I work at this group home. It's with kids." I'm like, oh, "Okay." So he's like, "We play sports and stuff." So I'm like, "Oh yeah." Anyways, and then when I get there, I'm like, "Whoa, this this is way more intense than playing sports with some kids, right?" Because kids that are traumatized, kids that are in the system. So then I went on to work as a juvenile counselor, which is instead of a correctional officer, because it was a correctional facility for youth. So I was there. I was in like my early 20s. I don't even know how I got that job. Must have did well in the interview. And then that's how I got my start. And it was there where I started piecing together why these kids were in jail, is because their environment, and in lack of these skills that we need to be able to do well in life, right? And then that's my background. That's my education. Then I quit the youth center a year in to start a foster home. So then I fostered youth that were coming out of jail for 6 years. And the whole goal was to give them what tools and skills they need to not go back to jail.
What was that like originally? Let's say your first year. How was that received by the youth that you worked with?
In the foster home?
Well, let's back to the first one in the
Okay.
correctional facility. Yeah,
Yeah.
how well was that received?
It was interesting because I did well there. And I didn't really know why I was doing well in the beginning. And then it was what I realized is because I was listening and I wasn't trying to, like, I'll use the term alpha male. I wasn't trying to, yell at them, boss them around, degrade them, to force them to do what I wanted. I built relationships. I spent time talking and listening. Right. So and I realized that's what people are looking for. So I just built off that. So I did well, connecting with these youth, and then the behaviors shifted. Like when I was on shift compared to when they would be on shift with someone else that was there.
In talking about foster care, when I was in my teens, my mom had a education degree and she worked in special education, and then she stopped working for the public schools and she started emergency foster care. So foster care, not long term, but more of short term, meaning here's a child who's in trouble for whatever reason. We'll take that child in until they can either go back to the home or they can find them a more long term solution. And that was very eye opening to me, to see that it wasn't always, she being in special education, she worked a lot with handicapped and mentally retarded, and we did get some handicapped and some mentally challenged, like legit retarded kids, like not derogatory, but like they had mental deficiencies. But there were sometimes we would get abused kids that were totally functional, didn't have those significant deficiencies, but they had those challenging environments. So we saw such a wide range of children coming through our house. It was very eye-opening, and very humbling for me to see the challenges that other people face, and to think that I faced my own challenges as a child, and it was it really did force me to kind of to take a look and say, okay, well, maybe I don't have it quite so bad. There were still some things I had to struggle with, but I think it helped with perspective. What did that do for you? Those kind of jobs, both the correctional facility and then working foster care.
It's something similar to what you just described. When I was a teen and growing up, I didn't have the greatest experiences either, right? I went through my own trauma. I did At the time, I didn't even know what trauma was, right? It wasn't until later on that I started learning about trauma. So then when I worked in the facility, that was what opened my eyes too. Is like, okay, like these are individuals who have been experiencing trauma like pretty much every day of their life. They're living in survival mode. So then I started thinking, looking at myself and like personally and then professionally and kind of connecting the dots. And I had this aha moment when I looked back at my childhood and, looking at hanging out with males and doing things and drinking alcohol, drugs, whatever, fights, right? And then it stems from this idea of what's going on mentally, what's going on emotionally. And if you're in a survival mode phase and everything's kind of like coming at you as a threat, that's how you're going to act. You're going to wake up every day, and if you're not looking forward to the day, you're not thinking, you think negative things are going to happen. Then that's how you're going to live. So that was, it was eye opening. It really was, and I started thinking, there's a lot of people struggling, and there's a reason why people behave a certain way. It's not just random. I guess, at that time, that's how I kind of was raised. Is some people make good choices, some people make bad choices, and that's how you end up in life. But that's not the case. It's way more complex than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult when you have so many things stacked against you, and you hear stories of people struggling and coming through on the other side. But no one's story is the same, and we like to use those encouraging stories to help people. But really, we have to approach it from the idea of empathy, that you're right, somebody else did succeed and faced similar circumstances, but you can't compare everybody so evenly. People experience things differently, and even what you see may not even be the full story. So coming to it with a sense of with an idea of empathy first of all is my idea. We had two of the two of the children that we cared for, we ended up adopting, and one of them actually passed away right before the adoption was finalized. He had significant mental and physical issues, and one of the physical issues killed him. And so it was really, really difficult. But again, it was just that the idea of, first of all, I need to be more aware of what I'm going through, because people tend to go on one side or the other. Either they're a little bit too easy on themselves, or they're a little bit too harsh on themselves. Like most people fall to one side or the other, right? Most people don't like fall right in the middle and they're like, I'm okay, right? And I tended to be one of those people where I kind of knew I was a good person and I knew I had good things to offer my community and my, a partner down the line. But I was raised in such a way that my self-esteem was so low, and my self-worth was so low. And it took me a long time to really climb out of that. It's just kind of a little tangent. But so let me get on. I actually wrote something down that I wanted to ask you, where I wanted to hear your thoughts on. The more I talk to stepdads, the more I realize that yes, being a stepdad has its unique challenges. However, a lot of the things that we talk about are really basic relationship type issues, right?
Yep.
Building trust with a child who is not yours. Building a solid foundation with your spouse so that you're on a level playing field, you love and respect each other, and you move forward with a united front of, this is the way we want to build our house and this is the way we're going to do it, right? Standards and accountability and empathy, like all the things that go with it. Yes, being a stepdad is unique, but the main complaints I hear are like, yeah, you just like you're not building basic relationships first. What are your thoughts about that?
I think you're very accurate, Neil. I believe I think when I mentioned earlier about it, it's parenting's too hard and then step parenting's harder. It's because it's our emotional response to it, right? And often in a parent-child relationship, so stepdad parent, are we looking to get our needs met? or are we looking to meet the child's needs? And that, to me, that's where it starts. And you mentioned it's these relationship skills. That's what it is. It's understanding what's going on, reading. It's building rapport. It's building trust. And I think for males, where we need to shift more. We have this authoritarian parenting model where we want kids that just respect us, listen to us. If we say jump, and then they say how high. And I think we need to shift that mindset. Like, we don't want our children to fear us. And as a stepdad, we don't want our stepchildren to fear us. That's going to just deteriorate the relationship. We want our children to come to us out of respect. So when you talk about these basic skills, that's what it is. It's communication is a huge one. How do we communicate to our daughter, stepsons? How do we get our point across? How do we active listening? How are we listening to them? Are we actually listening, or are we just kind of zooming through to try to tell them what to do? It comes down to these things, these foundational skills.
And when we talk about skills, you and I are very similar. We approach this as, build relationships and then use skill-based training to help people. Like, here's the skill. Let's figure out how you best can use this. I don't want to minimize that some people face significant challenges, and I get it, right? There's, in being a stepdad, you walk in and right away you have to acknowledge the loss that has already occurred, right? Yeah. So, you call it baggage if you want to, whatever you want to call it, but you have an individual, your partner, who has a previous relationship, they have children, and that relationship ended. So not only are they facing challenges, but the children are experiencing loss. So you're already walking into a situation that has those inherent challenges. And I like to say that there are no accidental stepdads. So if you decide to step into this role, you are making the deliberate choice to accept those circumstances, right? First.
Bang
all
on.
The complaints that come along with it, I got it. It's challenging, but you chose to be here, and it's a great opportunity, and I absolutely love it. But I had to have that honest conversation with Cindy and accept the fact that, my children are older. My youngest is 19 and she has a 7 and a 9-year-old. I had to be very deliberate to say, is this what I want? Yeah. And to walk into it with eyes wide open and an open heart and say, you know what, I'm choosing to do this. And then that leads me to my next point of, we talk about skills-based training and relationship building. I come at this from, performance psychology skills, but ultimately we are, and you said it, right? It's not about me. It's about raising good humans and having the expectations that build them up to be who they are or who they want to be, rather than try to control the situation. And in order to, and speaking of that word control, it's all about what is within my control. It's all about me, right? It's always pointing the finger back. If there's something going wrong, am I contributing to it? And what can I control? Okay, so maybe their biological dad's is an asshole, or maybe he's absent, right? Okay, so got it. But what are you going to do about it? It's always about pointing the finger back at you and what's within your control.
I love that. That is a phrase I use all the time with my clients: uncontrollables versus controllables. And if we focus all our energy on these uncontrollables, we're wasting our mental, emotional energy. We're just depleting ourselves. If we're going to focus on, like you said, if we're going to focus on what the bio dad's doing, well, then we're not getting anywhere. We're not moving forward. It's going to be a waste of our energy. So what can we control? And you said, like what you said, ourselves. The only thing we can ultimately control in this world, and this is where people have a hard time sometimes, is ourselves, right? And you mentioned earlier about what's going on and how am I contributing to it. So whatever's going on externally around us, we got to figure out, what's going on internally within me, and how am I contributing to this externally? What am I doing in this situation? Is there something I can shift? Is there something I can do differently? And like you said earlier, Neil, this is a stepdad role is a chosen role. Yeah, for sure. So if you're dating someone who has children, you're well aware of they have children. You're well of the situation, so you're volunteering to go into this position. Where I think stepdads run into some problems, and this is not to sound, and once again, like you said, I'm compassionate, I get it. There's lots of stuff going on. Where we run into problems is where we have these expectations, or that we think it's going to look a certain way. And when it doesn't look that way, sometimes stepdads can become resentful, right? Or, almost bitter, angry. And then that never serves us. Those emotions they don't serve us in that relationship. And then you said earlier too, with your partner, the step one is getting on the same page as your partner. In terms of parenting roles, what does parenting look like? What are your goals? What are you guys what results are you trying to get?
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I'm big on expectation management. I posted, it was a while ago now. Excuse me, a while ago now. I posted kind of an abrupt, with no real explanation, because I just wanted to see what kind of feedback I would get, and it was essentially in one of the parenting Facebook groups. Actually, I think it was one of the men's groups, that your expectations of your kids are killing your relationship. Like I'm all about accountability and standards, but your expectations for the way that and it's always should statements, right? It's
Yeah.
They should act this way, or they should do this, or they shouldn't do this, right? As soon as you say the word should, you should stop talking and
Yeah.
really think about the next thing that's about to come out of your mouth, because it's probably something along the lines of unmet expectations.
You're banging the shoulds, and yeah, that is, the shoulds get us into so much turmoil, right? The shoulds of what we expect others and of ourselves too. I should do this, I should be better, I should, right? And we could should all day, but it's about action and about what, back again, what can I control? If I don't like this, if this, what they're doing, I don't like, well then how do I deliver a different message? How do I talk to my partner and figure out, hey, what our kids are doing, we got to look at how can we get them to do something differently, and working as a team, working as a family, as a team. And as parents, obviously we're the leaders. Like, I'm not saying that the kids have equal say on everything. There's negotiables and there's non-negotiables. And sometimes as a stepdad, we got to realize that when it's really, really heated or it's really intense, we got to just support our partner, right? Like the bio parent, and be there in more of a supportive role, in their corner. And how can I support you? How can I support you as we go through this?
Cindy and I have had that conversation several times, and I brought up the topic of the stepdad's role being a support to the biological parent, and the default should be that I'm taking a step back, right? That's the default. Like, there's a larger conversation, and you together with your partner, with your spouse, have to decide what that looks like. And we've had those conversations, and she's actually said, I don't like that. I don't want you to take a step back, because but she also doesn't want me to be so abrupt and so forward. I come from a youth upbringing of authoritarian parents, right? We were the go outside and play generation. Kids were meant to be around but not heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go out and play. I was raised on the belt. Like, I was raised in a certain type of environment, and even the things that I don't like about that every once in a while still rear their ugly head,
Yep.
and I'll get irritated, and I'll snap and I'll say something, or I'll raise my voice. And she's like, why does it have to be that intense? Let's bring it down a little bit. I don't want you I don't want your default to be to step back. I want you involved because I like the way you parent. At the same time, I don't want the default to be too aggressive. So having that conversation with her has been very, not only refreshing, but also empowering, because I know what she expects of me.
Yeah.
And for those people that are having struggles, maybe that conversation, and even if you have the conversation, go back and have the conversation again. What does it look like now? What's going on? And always approach the conversation as, what am I doing that is good? And what can I do that I can get better? Always starting with positive reinforcement first. I'm a big fan of positive reinforcement as the strongest, what's the number one rule for anybody, not just kids, but anybody. I did a podcast episode a week or two ago where I used the example of, they used this in fighter pilot training. When they gave negative reinforcement as far as, hey, pointing out all the mistakes, sure, we want to point out certain mistakes, but if you make it into a discipline type thing, taking away that negative reinforcement did nothing positive or negative for fighter pilot training. So they've gone now more towards positive reinforcement of, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do over and over and over again. This is what I want you to do. And the more you say that, the more they're going to do those things that you want them to do. So tell me your thoughts and your background, because I've got my own thoughts, but I want to hear what you, when it comes to things like the was the BF Skinner idea of, punishments and reinforcements, the positive and the negative. How do you work with those into your coaching?
So when I work with my clients, part of my program, my week on discipline, and when I do posts on social media, is reminding people that what discipline actually is. Discipline is having a disciple, and it's teaching. Where we've gone wrong, in when you talked about how you're parenting, and I was parenting a similar way, in that generation of was punishment, right? Physical punishment, or blame, shame. That stuff doesn't work. And when I meet other parenting experts, which I've done for the 15 years now, that's the one we can all agree upon. One thing is that does not work. Scaring people, fear-based, does not work. So I'm a big believer, but I do hold people accountable. And that's where a lot of times when I post things, some people get up in their, why, you're just gonna let your kids do whatever they want. They're going wild. It's like, well, no. Accountability, responsibility. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to teach, ultimately what we're teaching is self-discipline. So when we do this punishment model, this fear-based model, all that happens as kids get older, and typically into the teenage years, is they just sneak around and try to get away with things. They lie. They do it, oh, don't wear that. And then they go down the street and they take it out of their backpack and they wear it. Or,
you're training them to be deceitful.
Yeah, you're training them to be deceitful. So, but when you approach it in a way where I want a healthy parent-child relationship, where I want you to come to me and you're allowed to make mistakes. And what does making a mistake look like? And how do we learn from that? And how do I teach you? How do I help you not make that mistake again? Because then I'll ask your kid, how do you feel? Usually they're going, I don't feel very good. So they don't need us to jump on them and make them feel worse. They already want to please us. In a healthy relationship, stepdad's biological, if there's a foundation there, a relationship has been built, they want to please us just like we want to please them. That's what people do in a relationship. So that it has to be discipline. Is how do we discipline in a way that keeps our children's dignity intact? How does it, discipline in a way that they don't feel ashamed of themselves? Because that does not help. So as a stepdad, when we talk about positive and negative, even in a bio relationship, I'm a 5-to-1 ratio. So for every negative interaction, which is usually a discipline or a correction, you want to have 5 good ones. So you want to essentially, in a simple way, you want to have 5 high fives to every, like, hey, why'd you do that? And I don't like that. What can we do differently? So what does that mean? You spend time, right? You connect, you do the simple things. And a lot of times with parents, that's where they run into problem when I work with clients what are you putting in on the front end? How much time are you spending just connecting, bonding? So then when you spend that time on the front end, when it comes to discipline, your kids are going to receive it better. It's just like if you have a friendship or a partnership with your partner, if you're never having fun, if you're never having lots of positivity, when you have a negative situation, usually someone's just going to blow up.
Well, and that makes me think of 2 things. So the 5-to-1, I'm actually familiar with that, because if our references are similar, I heard that from the Gottman Institute and the studies that they did with his relationship lab, where he realized, like nonverbals and what he called the 4 horsemen of deteriorating relationships, and the idea of a negative interaction or a negative feedback from a trusted person will register 4 times more powerful than a positive. And so you have to give that many more positives in order to overcome the power of those negative interactions. And I think there's something to be said for that, because looking back, I might roll my eyes when I was younger, when it came to things like, when my children were young and everybody was talking about self-esteem, I'd be like, well, whatever, that's not that important. Well, then, I look back on mine, and yeah, my self-esteem was crushed. I was raised in one of those houses where that was not a concern. And there was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of punishment. There wasn't a lot of physical touch and affection. And there wasn't a lot of positive reinforcement. There was a lot of opportunities, like they sent me up for all kinds of sports and made sure that I showed up. But there's a difference between providing an opportunity and actually getting involved, right? Yeah. Like my parents and my grandparents, like they didn't sit down and read us books. They didn't sit down and play games with us. They didn't go outside and interact and play with us. We had lots of friends and we did stuff. But I look back on and I'm like, man, yeah, that was a lot of positive interaction that was missed.
Yeah.
for whatever reason, and I think part of it was that's just how they were raised. My dad was, a small town farm boy, and that's, it was a tough life. And then, he went to the army and went to Vietnam. Like, it was a tough life. I think about if you watch the 70s show, like Red Foreman, like he wasn't that bad, but there wasn't,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of like hugging and touching and I love you. And that's just not how I was raised. And so overcoming that, I've had to look at that as that was a challenge to overcome a lot of negative. So yeah, I think those are really good points. So you have a Facebook group called Empowered Parenting, Creating a Healthy Parent-Child Relationship. And you've got over 1.4 thousand members in this thing. How long have you been doing that private group, that private group specifically?
About a year, I think, approximately.
Okay, man, that's pretty good. So, and how long have you been in, let's just call it private practice, your own business, your own coaching? What do you consider yourself? Coach, therapist, counselor? Where do you
When I started off, I was going with parent, coach, and counselor. I say, and I'm not a therapist because I don't have, like, my partner, she's a psychotherapist. So, and I don't have the degrees in different things. So when I work with people, I would say a combination of counseling and coaching. So let's look at what's gone on in your past that has led to how you're acting right now. Like we talked about before, like maybe you're just almost on autopilot when it comes to parenting. Well, like you're doing things that you picked up from your own parents. You don't even like it. So look at looking at triggers and stuff, uncovering those. And then I go into coaching, right, where it's like action. So now we figured out why you're doing this. So what do you do now moving forward? Because we could talk about the why all day, every day. But unless you put some action steps into place and developing some skills, you're going to stay kind of stuck there. So I'd say, yeah, a hybrid of a counselor coach is what I would call myself. If I work with someone who's really, really talking lots about the past, I will right away recommend, hey, a therapist. Like then that's you got to unpack that stuff to get to a certain point where you're ready to change, right? And that's the thing with the change. People, I'm sure you've met people in your life, right? I have friends from high school that have been telling me for 20 years they're going to change, and they haven't changed, right? So it's a tricky thing. People got to figure out where they're at. And therapy, counseling, coaching, I think they all serve a purpose. It's about where's that client at, and meeting them where they're at and giving them what they need.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that do a lot of different things, and there's nothing wrong with a coach, and there's nothing wrong with people that they don't have high college degrees and all these credentials. I think those things are important when you talk about therapy, coaching, the psychotherapy, like you were talking about your partner. Those are things that whether you talk about regulated careers or just ethics in general. Yeah, there's certain things you got to pay attention to, because there are some people that skirt some edges, that they might be pushing some lines that are inappropriate. I'm very clear on that. I'm a lot like you. I'm very clear of this is what I do, and if we start pushing into an area where it's not my area of expertise, I'm going to probably stop the conversation and try to figure out where we're going with this, because I don't want to stop what we're doing. I just want to make sure that if there's somebody else in addition to, or maybe you do need to go talk to a therapist before you talk to me. If you need to unpack something from your past, which I'm a huge advocate, man. I've been in therapy. I've been in the military 26 years. I got a lot of stuff in addition to the stuff that I bring in from my childhood, and I've got 2 failed marriages. There's a lot there. And if I'm not willing to go and talk to somebody, I'm not going to overcome this. I don't care how strong I am. I don't care how many books I read, how many podcasts I listen to. If I don't go talk to somebody who is qualified that can help me just detangle the mess, right? Because that's what we're talking about. It's a mess. Let's call it what it is. And having the courage to go talk to somebody, because knowing if you put in the effort, if you put in the time, you're going to be much better on the other side. And then we can start working on performance skills. And man, let me tell you what I can do for you then. But you got to start somewhere, right?
I love that. Like when sharing your personal journey, I've been on a similar personal journey to myself. I mean, obviously everyone's journey is different, but yeah, I did a lot of work with someone else, and I've did tons of personal development, but there's something about working with somebody else, therapeutic relationship, a helping professional relationship, like you said, and untangling it, getting it out, right? Talking about it, having a different perspective. It's so healthy. And it's so helpful. And then to me, that's a sign of strength. Yes, we've shifted in terms of mental health. I think we've got a long ways to go, especially, when you talk about males, this idea that it's weak, it's not weak. It's strength to be like, hey, this is what I've done. I've made a lot of mistakes. Lay it on the table, own it, and realize you can't change your past. You're not a bad person because you've made bad decisions. There's usually things that have led to that. So then unpack it, get a handle on it, and then, yeah, like you said, figure out where you want to go with this. What skill set do I need? What skills was I never taught? What skills was I lacking that got me into certain situations or relationships broke down?
And with that is also the idea of maybe you're doing something that's really good. Maybe
Yes,
you're really
exactly.
good. Maybe you're naturally optimistic, and that's good for you because it's gotten you through many things. Well, let's talk about that also. What does that mean, and how did you do it, and how can you get better at it? Right. So it's not always about the bad things, right?
No,
Because we all have things that we're really, really good at, and we all have things that we're just not clicking on.
strengths and
Right.
weaknesses, right?
Yeah, and it's not that we even have to be really that bad at something. It's just if you're not very good at it, why wouldn't you want to go talk to somebody? I don't want to be a better cyclist, but I do want to be a better dad. I do want to be able to throw a ball better. I do want to be able to hike a mountain. Like, I have my interests, and if I don't address the things necessary to be better at what I want to do, I'm not going to do those things very well. And as a
Yeah.
coach and a counselor, and me as a performance consultant, I'm telling people all day long that we can talk about one or two very specific things, but an elite athlete has to address all things in their life. You cannot be an elite performer in any high performance domain unless you address all the things that are causing you problems. Because an elite performer who has off the field problems, they're going to have problems on the field eventually. It's going to
Yeah.
catch up with them. And you, as a parent, you might be doing the majority of your things correctly, but if your job sucks, or you're not taking care of yourself physically or mentally, if you're giving all in to your family and none to yourself, that's a problem. And we need to address that, because that's a performance issue. And that's why I like the idea of performance psychology, because it's about sending you in a direction that's going to help you be better. So let's talk about those things.
I love that. I love it, Neil. And that's what it's about, is being the best version of ourselves, being the best version as ourselves as parents, as stepdads. And that's the thing. And that's the mindset shift, right? Is to realize, hey, like, no one's naturally born to be this like champion stepdad, right? I'll use that. Like, so what do? You go out and you look at, how do I build on my strengths, like you said, and where are these areas where I'm lacking, and how do I find someone to help me with these areas? And then when you talked about the rest of the life, I totally agree with you. If your job or your health, all those, it's all connected. It's like a pie, right? And we look at the pie. If we're just looking at one slice of the pie, it's the rest of the slices are going to catch up to us. And just like you said with an athlete, you got to have your head on straight. You have to have everything kind of in order to be able to perform at a high level.
That's awesome. So you and I are connected on Facebook. You and I share several groups together, and I tell people all the time, like, I'm building something here with Champion Stepdad as a community. The podcast and the Facebook page are just the beginning, and in fact, I'm getting ready to launch a membership type program. But you and I are very similar in that, like, we have this skill that we're very passionate about, and we want to help people. And here's the areas, and I'm not afraid to put it out there. Talk about your group, the Empowered Parenting. You and I are both in the Stepdad Den, and I think there's a couple of them out there. Like, search for the groups. Facebook is easy because most guys at our age are probably on Facebook, right? Unless they recently deleted it for political reasons, but whatever. So the idea that find something. Right. I don't mind promoting other people's stuff. I've been on here talking about Front Row Dads. I had a couple guys that were part of Front Row Dads. I think that's a fantastic organization. I don't care what group you find a home in. It doesn't have to be mine. Look up Michael, look up whatever interests you or whatever challenges you. Go find that and find a community that you can jump into. And I found quite a few of your videos that you post out are really, really helpful. I've seen you guest on multiple podcasts and other Facebook groups. So great work, and I commend you for the work you did, and especially how you started. Working in a youth correction facility and then going into foster care. That's something that both of those things I've been involved in myself. I've done mental skills training at the Nebraska Correctional Facility, but I also worked back when I lived in Tucson, Arizona. We used to walk the streets with backpacks and emergency supplies looking for homeless children. These are the kind of things that are very near and dear to me, because if you walk into the world with a servant's heart, your life is going to have so much more meaning to it. And so thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you being here. Michael Larson on Facebook. Where else can people, if somebody wanted to search for you, what would be the best place? Where would you direct them to?
Go to my website. My website leads you to all my social media. It gives all my info. So www.mylifeupgrade.ca.
My Life Upgrade. Got it. Okay. Man, I'm looking forward to connecting with you in the future more, both in this community and the other communities that we share. Really appreciate your time. It's been great.
Thank you, Neil. I really enjoyed this. And the cool part is we never, talked that much before this. And what we clicked on today, and then we have two different lives, right? What we clicked on, like you said it just now, helping people and becoming the best versions of ourselves. That's what I'm finding we're connecting on. And that's just wonderful. So thank you so much for having me on here. Great job on what you do. You're going to help a lot of people. It's wonderful. So I give you all the kudos in the world. So